Hello and welcome to the video for Wednesday, September 9th for basic audio production. I'm going to let people in from the waiting room. Actually, let me just pause it for 1 second. Okay, letting people in from the waiting room.
Hey Greg,
Hey, how you doing, Dylan?
good. How are you?
Good. How's everybody else doing today?
Good.
Okay, here's some bumping noises and then a rah, and a grunt. That's about how I feel on a Wednesday morning. Well, let me get my attendance up so I can take attendance while you guys are coming in here. Let's see, pima.edu. Okay, uh, so we'll go to teach and attendance tracking. See who's here. All right, la 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 la. Basic audio production. Okay, Max is here. Um, Iman is here. Where are you, Iman? I don't see you. Okay, maybe I'll see you later. Dylan's here. Dylan. Okay. And then we have Abby is here. And Ken. Okay. And then we've got Trinity and Jillian. Where are you here? Cam. All right, right there. And then we have Iman and Vlad. Vladimir is up here somewhere, yeah. And then Iman is where? Andre. Oh, right here. Okay, cool. All right, here's two more. Bree and Michael. Just came in. Here's Michael. And then Bree is here. Okay, cool. I got all you guys registered. Oh, and here is Venust. Okay, and he is right here. Okay. All right, cool. Looks like I got most of you guys in the attendance right now. So, welcome. I hope you guys are having a nice morning. Did you feel some of that cool weather last night?
Did.
That was kind of nice, huh?
Yeah, I actually felt it in the morning yesterday too, because I woke up pretty early and felt a little bit chill to the air.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of cool. Uh,
I'm loving it.
yeah. Um, oh wait, let me let in one more person here. Carl, let me put
I'm a
him.
winter guy myself, so
Oh, you are?
yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, what else could you be in a place like Tucson, right?
Right.
But of course, do you mean like Tucson winter, which is like summer for
Not
some?
really.
It's like
Yeah.
summer for the East Coast.
Well, I'm technically from the East Coast, but I've lived here most of my life. So when I go back there, it's definitely that's not my speed. So this is more my realm per se.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm from California. I think my parents moved here when I was 4, and I felt like I had done something wrong. Like I was being punished.
Like, what did I do?
I still haven't forgiven him for that one, but anyway. Okay, well let me go to the class website and see what we got here. Okay. All right, pima.dreamco.com. Okay, and then basic audio production, and then we share the screen, and boom, and boom. Okay, so let's see. I don't think Bill is here yet. Let me see. Participants. I don't see Bill in there yet, and I had him down to do a presentation today, so we'll see if he shows up. If not, I would say the odds are pretty slim that he's going to do a presentation. Um, here's Brandon. Okay, we'll admit him. Boom. Okay. So yeah, if Bill shows up, we'll see if he has a presentation. Okay, so first I want to check with some of you guys. Those of you that made music in Audition, we had the opportunity to play some of that while you guys were in class last week, and I want to see if there's anybody else who made some music in Audition that uploaded it that we haven't had a chance to hear yet. Any of you guys do that? The silence is deafening. So I'm going to say it's a no. Okay, so bing, check that off the list. Okay. All right, so I want to check in with you guys about Project One. Where would you say you guys are with Project One? If you had to give me a percentage of a completion percentage, are you 30% done, 50% done, 0% done? What do you think?
Me personally, I'd say 30.
Okay, so you're about a third done. And let's see, Ken, where are you with your Project One?
I'd say I'm at 50%. I just have to shoot and edit, and then I'll be good.
Okay.
I would say I'm at 50%. Yeah, I just need to shoot the footage, but I have the audio and an idea of what I'm doing.
Okay, so let me ask.
Carl's at 70%, but I just got injured, Greg, so I'm wheelchair bound right now. That's why my camera's going to be off right now.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask you, do most of you think you could finish Project One in 2 weeks?
Oh yeah,
Easy.
Easily.
Sure.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
that'd be perfect.
Okay, so let's see. Now I got to do math. Okay.
That's why I'm a drummer.
I'm gonna say the 23rd. The 14 plus 9. I mean, it's the morning, right? I can't add. How about we set the 23rd as the deadline for this project? Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you want to do is, whatever program you're using, whether it's Premiere or Adobe After Effects or whatever you're using to compile your commercial, export it to some sort of movie file, a .mov or AVI or something like that, and put it in your Google Drive folder for the 23rd. That'll be the day that we look at all of those and we give each other constructive criticism about. So that's the day it's due, and I'll put that on the website. Okay, cool. All right. Anybody have any questions about Project One? Are you guys all doing okay on it then? You're sort of heading in the right direction?
I did have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I found like the audio that I wanted to use, for my commercial, but were we supposed to layer tracks for this? Like have, a person talking and then have the like music or whatever, or can it be on the same track?
Well, yeah, it can be on the same track, but you're doing yourself a disservice if you do that. You mean is it there already?
So the commercial I found is the audio with it's Kendrick Lamar, talking, but Kobe Bryant's in it as well.
Yeah.
But there's already music in it. So it's like, do I find a different video or can I just use that one?
You can use that one. I mean, I remember your project and what you're doing, and I see where that might be perfect for it. So, normally in this project, what we would want you to do is use separate tracks so you could experiment with layering them.
Right.
But just make an effort to do that on the next project. And
Okay.
this one because of the way it worked out, your media is just like that. So we'll just deal with it.
Okay.
Now I'm glad you asked that though, D, because one really key important thing I have to tell you guys right now about your audio, putting your audio on your videos. Don't mix exclusively with headphones. Don't mix exclusively with headphones. In other words, when you're setting the levels of like your background music and your dialogue, take your headphones off and play it through speakers. Now, the reason is because headphones can sometimes give you an inaccurate mix of the two. And I've had plenty of students who have they mix their whole project, they turn it in, and then the music overpowers the vocals. You can't hear anything that's happening. And they're like, I don't understand. I mixed it in headphones and it sounded great. Well, in reality, headphones are great. Don't get me wrong. But in reality, most people listen to audio via speakers. I mean, sure, we all have our little AirPods or whatever occasionally, but you have to mix audio for productions, for projects, as if it's being played in a room, not as if it's being played in headphones. So actually, your best bet is to mix it, using speakers. And if you want to, you can check it with headphones and see how it sounds in that sort of medium. But if you mix exclusively with headphones, you might have an unpleasant surprise. Okay. Um, so, all right, cool. So we got a deadline for project one, and I'll put that on the website. And then I wanted to talk to you guys about this assignment that I put up on the website last week. It's this website called Light. I put Light Night. It's Light Note. Let me correct that real quick. I'll say Light Note. And while I'm here, I'll put in the deadline. Let's say deadline for this project is September 23rd. Let me put Wednesday so you guys know that. Okay, Wednesday, September 23rd. Okay. So, all you guys have the keyboards now, and unfortunately, the class that came in last week on Monday, GarageBand wasn't installed on the computers yet, and I wrote a message to IT, and they installed it for the Wednesday class. So the Wednesday class got to use GarageBand and see how to make music, but unfortunately, the Monday class didn't. So one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about in the future is software that you can use at home with your keyboards to make music. Now, if you have a Macintosh, you can use GarageBand, right? No problem. It's free. It comes with it, the Mac, so you guys are good. But I assume a lot of you have PCs, so I'm looking at a couple different pieces of free software that you can use. Yeah, so Abigail says she has a PC. And that's fine. There's free software out there, and I just have to find something good that I can recommend to you guys so you can try it at home. Now, speaking about music and playing on the keyboards and stuff like that, let me go to the post for last week. Okay, here we go. So it says all basic audio production students should go to lightnote.co and log in using email address gilamo@gmail.com and password PIMACC and do the following sound lessons. So let's see, Gilamo, password PIMACC. Okay, sound waves all the way through major key. So I click on that, and then, I guess you go to Light Note Premium, and then you go log in, and I guess that's all my password junk right there. So, oops, invalid email address. Oh, maybe it's the, that's jacked up. Maybe I used my Pima email address. Let's see, gjalamo@pima.edu. Oh, let's see, this is PimaCC. Let me see if this logs me in. Oh, man. Oh, invalid email or password. Okay, here we go. Gilamo. I think I changed my password, which is why it's jacking up.
You're doing great, Greg.
What's that?
Doing great.
Yeah. Okay, so if you log in, then you get all of these different lessons that you can try. And the first one is Hear About Sound. And I went over the first three of these with the class on Wednesday. And so the class on Wednesday just has to do the last couple of these lessons. The class that met with me last Wednesday, and the class on Monday should do all five. And basically, you just look through here, and you can play the little examples, like that. Let me make it a little louder. And basically it talks about sound waves and frequency, and it's really kind of fun. Because you get the visuals, which explains sound in sort of a visual way, and then you get the audio component. Sorry, that one's so loud. But anyway, so they talk about sound and then harmony, and the pentatonic scale, which is 5 notes of the chromatic scale that always sound good together. You can make melodies out of that. And so this is just to sort of introduce you to some of the basics of music. And then when I get you some recommendations on software, you can play around on your keyboard with some of this stuff. Okay, so take a look at that when you get a chance, and look at those first few lessons, and let me know if you have any questions, and we'll talk about some of that stuff next week. Okay, so let me go back to basic audio production here. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the Light Note website? Okay. All right, so today what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about microphones a little bit, and then I wanted to give you guys some time to work on your projects, because that deadline's coming up, and now that you have a set deadline, you can start working towards getting everything done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this link right here, this page, and talk about what they call the 3 types of microphones you need to know about. Now, of course, this website is focused on using microphones for things like recording music and vocals and stuff like that, but the same principles apply if you're recording music for film production, or you're recording dialogue, or you're recording on location. You still need to know which microphones work best for which situations. So it says, what are the 3 different types of microphones? Now, I wrote on the post today that you guys should get to know the differences between the microphones at least well enough to be able to answer questions about them on a quiz. And the reason I'm telling you this, I'm not really a big fan about tests or quizzes, but there's a couple things I think you should walk away from this class knowing. One is what microphone to use for what purpose, right? Another is to understand, how sound waves work. And then, of course, how to apply that information to specifically film, like, using boom mics and, recording with headphones on, like, location, mixing sound, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important you know these things. So I probably will give you a little quiz on the different types of microphone and how they should be used. So just kind of a heads up on that. Okay, and I will give you plenty of warning when that quiz is coming up. Okay, so there are 3 types of microphones. Let me make this really super big so it's easy for you guys to see. There's dynamic mics, condenser mics, and ribbon mics. So it says each mic has its own unique sound and strength. When paired with the right instrument, it can make it sound better than even the real thing. Well, that's questionable. Okay, so which mics should we use for what, right? So let's start with what are called dynamic mics. Now, if you guys recall, we looked at the Shure SM58, which is the one with the round top. This is the Shure SM57, which, it's just kind of like a cylinder. And it says dynamic mics like the Shure SM57 are the workhorse mics of the studio. Dynamics are tough mics. They can get hit by drumsticks, dropped on stage, and even survive a fall from a helicopter twice, right? So like I told you, dynamic mics are the go-to mics for anybody who's doing any sort of, physical relocation with their sound gear. If it's a touring band, or, if it's just somebody who like, you know, a presidential campaign, and they have to go from town to town and throw the microphones into a suitcase and stuff like that, you know, the odds are pretty good they have dynamic mics, which are these really sturdy microphones. So it says they can take the wear and tear of a home studio and then some. And this is what you really need to know. Dynamic mics are not particularly sensitive. In other words, you wouldn't use a dynamic mic to record a violin, because violins are very delicate instruments that have a lot of sound frequencies and a lot of reverberations that, you know, make this beautiful, incredible sound, and they need the most sensitive of microphones to pick them up. So, you know, if you considered a scale, like, you know, of microphones, on one end would be the dynamics, which are the workhorses. You can throw those across the room and keep using them, right? Those are the ones you use on location for, you know, for sound reinforcement for bands and stuff. On the other end of the spectrum are, you know, what we'll talk about a little later, the condenser microphones, really expensive, super fragile, giant diaphragms on those things so they can vibrate and pick up every little nuance frequency, right? So those are the two ends of the spectrum, right? Okay, so it says dynamic microphones aren't sensitive, which makes them perfect for loud sources. This is why you often see them on snare drums and guitar amps. You know, it's possible, even though many of you guys are filmmakers, that you'll make music videos for your friends or, you know, somebody else. And while you're shooting live on location, the band may actually be playing. So it makes sense to record that live sound. So you might, you know, bring a sound engineer along with you and have them mic up all the, you know, guitar amps and the snares and everything. And of course, you want to use dynamic mics for that. Also, dynamic mics are also very cheap. You know, an average of about $100 a microphone is considered cheap. And so you can get a bunch of those and use them on location. Now, one of the things that is being introduced to us right now is something called polar patterns, and P-O-L-A-R, you know, like polar bears, right? What polar patterns are, if you look at this like sort of graph right here, you know, it looks kind of like a radio tower graph or something like that, you know, radio signals going out. It's a polar graph. But what this graph represents is, let's say that you had a microphone set up and you had a camera that was on top of the microphone looking down, right? What would happen is if somebody sang into the microphone, excuse me, the microphone would pick up sound in a specific pattern, and that's called the polar pattern. So in this picture right here, the microphone is right in the center, and the object, you know, the person who's making the sound would be over in this location. So in other words, the microphone would pick up everything in front of them and then just a little bit on the sides at the back and absolutely nothing directly behind the microphone. So we're saying, you know, the microphone's pointing this way, it's getting everything in front, it's getting a little bit on the back of the sides and nothing behind it, right? So this is what's called a unidirectional pattern, uni meaning one. In other words, you point the microphone at the source and it essentially picks up the source, right? This unidirectional pattern is also known as a cardioid pattern. Can anybody venture a guess as why?
It mimics a heart.
Exactly. This little shape here that you see in dark, if you flipped it around upside down, it kind of looks like a heart. So, so like it says here, it picks up all of the sound coming at it, but virtually almost nothing. It cancels out the sound from behind it, right? Okay, it says this type of polar pattern is great for home recording studios where the room is your worst enemy. So they talk about the fact that, you know, if you have a home recording setup, you know, your room might be a funky room. You know, we talked about the fact that rectangular rooms are probably the best shape. You might have a square room, which sucks. You might have a circular room, which sucks. You know, you might have funky rafter ceilings or something. So if you don't have a lot of money to fix up your room, then you really want to take the sound that you're getting and you want to isolate it and you want to, you know, make it as small an area as possible that's, you know, picking up the sound. So if you have one of these unidirectional mics, you're basically just picking up what's right in front of it, and the microphone isn't picking up as many of the reverberations of the room. So you're taking the funky room out of the equation. And that's what they're saying here. You can strategically place your recording mics to point away from reverberant parts of your room. Now, what do they mean by a reverberant part of your room?
Parts with the most reverb,
Right, exactly. So, and what's reverb again?
echoes.
Yeah, echoes. So, in other words, um, echoes do really well on solid walls. So, in other words, if you have two solid walls, like you can see back behind me here, there's a corner, right? If you've got a couple of solid flat walls, any sound that hits those is going to reverberate. It's going to bounce off one, hit the other, bounce off again, and it's going to ping all these reverberations all over the room. So that's a really reverberant surface, right? On the other hand, in front of me, which you guys can't see, I have some foam padding on the walls, and that's going to absorb sound. So it'd be better for me to sit in front of the foam padding and have microphone in front of me and record than it would be for me to sit in front of these walls, which are going to reverberate. All the sound's going to bounce off them. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So one other point they make here, which is the dynamic mics are not great on low-end instruments such as kick drums or bass. And there's special microphones that are made for that are really, they look like eggs. They're these just giant microphones like this one here that are made specifically for getting low-end instruments. Okay, so then they kind of summarize here. Dynamic mics are great all-around mics. It says be aware that the sound will not be as pretty as a condenser mic. In other words, condenser mics are just better mics. It's like the difference between I don't know. I'm trying to think of a car that has a great reputation. I don't know, BMWs. I don't own one. A BMW, I think, has a really good reputation as a car, and maybe just think of like your car. I don't know. I don't know what kind of car you drive, but like
Oh, you're right.
yeah, fun. What do you drive, Dylan?
Buick Century.
Right. Okay. So whatever whatever most of us can afford.
You got me.
I'm in a Subaru. I've driven Volvos a lot of my life. They're great cars. You know what I mean? But then there's cars that are like the workhorses. The Toyotas, the Volkswagens, the Subarus, the Volvos. Dynamic mics are like those. They're workhorses. They can go anywhere. They sound good. But if you want the Cadillac, if you want the BMW, you're going to get a condenser mic. Okay. It says dynamics tend to make instruments sound warmer and more aggressive. So good for rock bands. Okay. Now we move over to condenser mics, which is what I was talking about, is the other end of the spectrum, the sort of pretty, beautiful sounding mics. So it says condenser mics are the rich, frilly cousins of dynamics. They're more complicated than their dynamic counterparts, so they're much more fragile and expensive. It says they've gotten much cheaper in the past. It says condenser mics are much clearer in comparison to dynamics. They're more balanced, accurate, and sweeter than their powerful counterparts. They're also much more sensitive, which makes them perfect for softer and brighter sounds. As a studio microphone, and that's the key right there, they're very powerful. If you are somebody who's going to be doing audio recording of any type, you would probably take your dynamic mics out into the field and you would leave your condenser mics in the studio because they're just too sensitive and they can get damaged. So let's see. So it says, because of their top end bump, condensers give extra air to what they pick up, making them sound less muffled than a dynamic would. So in other words, we have these different frequencies, the bass frequency, which is very low, the mid-range, and the treble. And condenser mics have an extra bump where they pick up a little bit of extra treble frequencies, and that makes them sound a little richer and less muffled than the dynamic mics. Now, they also have a similar polar pattern. In other words, it's a cardioid pattern, unidirectional. They pick up essentially everything in the front and a little bit on the back and the sides, right? Now, there is a different kind of microphone that you can get, which is called a bidirectional microphone. And what it does is that it's got like, a mic diaphragm on either side, and you put it in the middle of a room, and then you can have sound sources on either side, singing into it. Now, what do you think something like this might be good for in your world, in sort of the film world? A bidirectional mic. Can you think of a good use for this?
Stereo audio.
Stereo audio. Okay, that's a good one. What's another one? Think about if you're filming a documentary or interviewing somebody?
Possibly if you have like a speaker and then a situation behind them going on, like if they're a worker and they work at like a farm, and then you want to capture audio of both them and per se workers.
Yeah, that's a great example. So let's say that you had your camera on a farmer and you had a microphone in front of them, and behind you was like the pigs and the cows and the fish, whatever they have at the farm. I don't know, fish.
Livestock.
Maybe it's a yeah, maybe it's a trout farm. I don't know. Uh, anyway, so you're picking up the farmer from the front end, and then you're picking up the ambiance from the back. So that's a good example. Any other examples you guys can think of? Okay, so I was thinking of the example of if you're interviewing somebody, right? You can sit them down in a room, you put the microphone in between you, you're on one side, they're on the other, right? And then you say, so tell us, why exactly did the nuclear power plant melt down? And then they give their answer, right? And you're getting all of that audio, nice high levels of pickup on both sides of that. So, okay, so that's a bidirectional mic. Now, by the way, when I say I'm going to give you guys a quiz about this stuff, it's not going to be on every single little detail of everything we talk about. It's really just going to be, what are the general types of mics? Can you name the three? What would you use them for? You know, here's a cardioid pattern. Can you name what that's used for? And the answer is, it's bidirectional as opposed to this would be, unidirectional or cardioid, right? So really, I'm looking for really, really basic answers. Now, there's another type of microphone which is called omnidirectional. Does anybody know what omni means?
Everything.
Very good, Vlad. So omni is a Latin word which means all. So omnidirectional means this microphone literally picks up things all around it. Now, what would be a good example in your film world of a time when you use an omnidirectional mic? What do you think, D? Have you got any idea when you might use an omnidirectional mic?
I'm thinking maybe if you're doing like a one of my something that has multiple people in it. So like maybe you're an interviewer and maybe you have some kind of interview where you have multiple subjects.
Yeah,
Would
like
that work?
one thing that comes to mind just because we happen to be in a political season here is, what if there was a political candidate standing in a room surrounded by people? And so you had that omnidirectional mic there, and what's happening is it's picking up them, but it's picking up the sound of the room, all the way around, right? Um, Iman, can you think of another scenario where you might use a omnidirectional mic?
A lot of times you can just need ambient sound, and you can use one of these mics just to pick up ambient sound for a film.
Right, perfect. So maybe you're filming by a freeway, and of course, you're not going to use the live location sound as you get it, but you want to have sort of a library of ambient sounds. So you go put that microphone down by the freeway, and of course, there's a freeway on one side, and there's a farm on another, and there's a factory on another side, and like you're picking up all of that stuff. And another good example is if you're making movies that are going to be in the theater, oftentimes they'll have that surround sound, that, Dolby 5.1 or whatever it is. And those are speakers that are in front of you and in back of you and on the side of you. And if you pick up an entire environment, you can actually take that sound and you can distribute it to the different speakers. So, you put somebody in that environment. Like, what was the name of that war movie that just came out last year? Was it 1912? Is that what it was called?
1917.
1917.
Wait, what was it, Vlad?
1917.
1917. Okay. Did any of you guys see that?
Yes.
I like the reverb there.
Yes.
The audio on yeah, the audio on that was amazing. In fact, I think it might have won one of the Academy Awards for the audio. Did you notice that, Vlad?
No.
Okay. So if you watch that movie in a theater, which of course you would have had to see it like 6 months ago before the pandemic hit, right? You were just surrounded by all these sounds, and it's just like what we're talking about. These soldiers are going through trenches and they're going through farmlands, And you know, there's enemy planes flying over, there's animal sounds over here, there's gunfire over here, and then they're having their conversation over here. And you were literally surrounded by sounds, and the audio was so incredible. It literally dropped you in the scene, right? So, you know, once again, omnidirectional mics are great for things like that. Okay, all right. La, 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 la. Okay, now we're talking about condenser microphones, which we know are like the Cadillacs of microphones, right? And condenser microphones come in sort of two general categories, what we call large diaphragm mics and small diaphragm mics, right? Now basically the larger the diaphragm, the more sensitive it is and the more money you pay for it. And like a super large diaphragm mic could be used, you know, to pick up an orchestra and would sound amazing, right? But even a small diaphragm condenser microphone could be really good to pick up something like a violin, because it's still, you know, a condenser microphone, so it's going to get a lot of dynamics. It's going to get a lot of what we call the timbre of the instrument. Can somebody define timbre for me? Timbre.
Um,
It's sort of the
Tone.
bass sounds, tone, the you know, the underlying stuff that makes it sound like what it is.
Right. Very good. The way that I would describe timbre actually is it's the words that you would use to describe the sound. For example, if if a violin that was recorded sounded sort of it sounded very like light like bird song, or maybe like light vibrating balsa wood or something like that. I mean, if it sounded like the words that you used to describe it, like woody or a sweet, the sweet sound would be a timbre, right? Or bitter, you know, if something's played out of tune or something like that. So timbre is kind of the tone, the feeling, the evocative feeling that something gives you. Like, you know, bass tones are very low, and there's sort of a very dark sort of underbelly to bass tones. And then, you know, light, trebly violin tones, you know, the other end of the spectrum are very sweet and lilting, you know, through the air. So that's what timbre is. It describes the feeling of the sound, right? Um, okay, and so like I said, you know, large diaphragm condenser mics are going to be very sensitive to that type of timbre. Okay, so here they're talking about some large diaphragm condenser mics. These are great on what they call full-bodied instruments, and that might be something like a cello or a violin. And then here's some examples of small diaphragm condenser mics. And they're also known as pencil condensers because they look like little pencils. And these are great for picking up like drums. You can put a couple of these over a drum kit, and you can pick up all the cymbals, all that sizzle that the cymbals have, right? And they're great for home studio recording. Now, one of the things that you need to know about condenser mics, and you know, sometimes you will use condenser mics on, you know, remote shoots, is they use something called phantom power. So in other words, the microphone itself, because it has that little, you know, that really fragile diaphragm, it needs a lot of power to operate, and the microphone is built in such a way that it doesn't really have a power supply on it. So what you have to do is you have to supply the power to the microphone via the mixing board, and that's called phantom power, also known as 48 volts. And, you know, so you just switch a little switch on the channel when the microphone is coming in, and it says phantom power, and you just do that, and it shoots the 48 volts into the mic, and then it can pick up the sound. Okay, so two types of mics we talked about, dynamic mics and condenser mics. We talked about large diaphragm and small diaphragm condenser mics, and we talked about some different polar patterns like cardioid, which is unidirectional, bidirectional, which is, you know, either side, and omnidirectional. Okay, so the third, go ahead, William.
It should be noted that the Canon C100 that we have does not provide phantom power.
Okay, so in other words, if you're recording with that and a condenser microphone, you need some way to power the microphone.
Yeah, or you need one that's self-powered.
Okay, All right, thank you for that. Okay, and then ribbon mics are the third type of microphone. And it says ribbon mics are the black sheep of the family. These microphones were very popular in the 50s and 60s before dynamic and condenser came on. As such, they're very fragile and expensive. And it says, but few mics can produce the warmness and vintage vibe that these can. So ribbon mics, you know, I've talked about violins a lot. Ribbon mics are great for violins because they're just so sensitive. And like I use the violin as an example, or even a flute of really nuanced tones, you know. And it says ribbon mics are always bidirectional, so they're better used in a room that is well treated to lower the amount of room sound. So in other words, you want to use a ribbon mic in a studio where the room has been optimized for sound. And so they give you some examples here, you know, of different type of ribbon mics. So that's the third one. You know, the ribbon mics are very expensive, very sensitive, and they give you that vintage sort of sound. Okay, now it says, you know, which microphones should you use for different instruments. Now, we're not going to go into all this stuff here, but you know, you can look here and they have all of these different categories here. So if you happen to be recording an acoustic guitar, you can click on this little thing here, and it's going to tell you which microphones you should use for that. Or if you're going to do vocals, you can do that, right? Now, this particular website has, you know, a incentive for giving you all this information because they sell microphones. So you know, if you click on, or they have, I should say, maybe they get affiliate money for selling microphones. So you know, all the information they have is good, but you know, it'll say something like, you know, here's a great microphone you can use for acoustic guitar, get it here, and you can click on it and then go buy that microphone. But it's a great resource, this website, for all of this different type of information. Okay, any questions or even comments from you guys about mics? What microphones have you guys used that you like?
The one I'm using now.
And do you have a name for it?
I don't know what kind it is.
Okay.
It's
Does
just
anybody
cool.
know a type of microphone or even the name of the microphone that they've used?
Well, you know I'm using a condenser microphone right now.
Yeah.
Brandon, you're using condenser?
Pima has those Sennheisers, which are pretty nice.
Yeah, they're very
And
nice.
then I have a Boya miniature little microphone. It's cardioid, and it actually does the bass better than the Rode equivalent of it.
Now, obviously, Rode is a big name in film microphones that are used for film. There's a lot of great shotgun mics that Rode makes, and other similar companies. Sennheiser makes some good mics. And then there's other mics that you can use for other purposes. Like Abby here says she likes her Blue Yeti. So let me go to Amazon and let's bring up the Blue Yeti. Okay, so here's the Blue Yeti, and let's see. Let me see how much these things run for. See all buying options. Okay, $200. All right, close that up.
Jesus Christ.
What's that, Vlad?
$200?
That seems like a lot.
Well, yeah, I'm a poor college student.
That's pretty expensive there, bud.
Yeah,
Pretty expensive.
I mean, yeah, okay. You know, a lot of you that are talking to microphones right now, if you have a microphone that plugs into your computer, you might have paid anywhere from $20 to $45 for it or something like that. And it probably sounds halfway decent, you know. But as I told you earlier in the semester, microphones are very much the more you pay, the better you get kind of a world. $100 for a microphone will get you, you know, one of those dynamic microphones that you can use for any purpose. And so, you know, if you are somebody who's operating on a budget, which most of us are, it makes a lot of sense to invest in dynamic microphones, things like the Shure SM57 and 58, because, like I said, they're workhorses. They're the Volkswagen of the microphone world, right? Now, Abby mentioned that she has a Blue Yeti, and I really like these microphones. this particular one is great for using with computers because it comes with USB, and it's great for doing podcasts, for doing interviews, for doing streaming. Abby, what do you use your Blue Yeti for?
I used to do some streaming, so that's why I got it.
You what?
I used to do some streaming, so that's why I got it.
Oh, okay. And where are you you're happy with the results?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. So any of these type of microphones that sit on a little stand and plug in via USB, they're going to be in the 150 range and up. But you combine those with things like, the screen here, that'll catch the S's and the sibilants, right? And then you put it on a stand, especially if you have a shock mount stand, which will capture any vibrations, and you have got a wonderful setup for any type of home dialogue recording you want to do, interviews, streaming, podcasting, all that kind of stuff. Now, like I said, it can get, that's a little expensive for some of your budgets, but you also have to think about, when you guys think about getting a camera, you know,
Oh yeah.
what's $500? What's $1,000? It's nothing. Well, microphones are not just some little add-on accessories to camera. They're the entire audio part of your production. And so if you think of it as an audio visual production, the audio is oftentimes 50% of your production. You're concentrating on the visual, but the audio through sound effects, dialogue, voiceovers, music, background scores, that's providing a huge percentage of the ambience. And you can tell that by, have any of you guys ever seen those videos where they strip the audio out of a movie or something?
Oh yeah, those are wild.
Yeah, and
What
so,
is it like?
yeah, what you realize is audio is used, I hate to use this term, but audio is used to manipulate the emotions of the viewer, right? So if you watch a beautiful movie and then all of a sudden, something sad happens, the cat got run over by the tractor or something like that, the uh, the music gets really sad, and then you see the sad faces, and all of a sudden your emotions are just like, oh my God, that's so sad. They're literally manipulating you with the audio. So it's an incredible tool to add to your visuals to sort of guide the viewer's emotions. It's a fast-paced action scene, and so you pick up the pace, the music, or maybe it's a club scene, and so there's some hip hop stuff going on, right? And each of these takes you, through the different modes, how you react to that audio and the visual, right? So
Yeah,
go ahead.
the Boya runs about $35 to $40.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. All right. That's a reasonable price. Okay. So let's go back here. Okay. So, what's some of the audio gear that you guys have available to you to check out from the film department? Is there any there that you guys use regularly? Do they have those little Zoom recorders or anything?
Yeah, they do, I believe.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. I think they're called Zoom recorders.
Well, handheld ones?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, those things.
These things are amazing. I love these things, right? Um, so what's nice about these recorders is you notice the two microphones there, so they can give you a stereo sound, right? Two microphones equals stereo. So that means they can give you, sounds from both sides of the spectrum, right? And then, of course, you can operate them digitally. They do really good quality sound. They're not cheap. This one's $200. It's as much as a Yeti, but they're incredibly powerful. These things are great for, like, if you want to record like a little acoustic concert inside of a cafe. This thing would be incredible for that purpose, right? Um, okay, what other options do we have here in the Zoom recorders? Well, these are all just different versions of the Zoom recorders, but they're fantastic. If you guys can get a hold of these either through Pima to use or even for yourself for your future productions, that would be great.
Yeah, Tascam, I think, makes some good ones too.
Okay, let's see what we have there. Tascam portable recorder. Yeah, they look very similar to the Zoom. So very nice. Okay, and then of course, here's a type of microphone that you guys are probably familiar with, the lavalier. Have you
So
guys?
I know what those are, and I've tried using them, and I don't, and I've never been able to get it to work.
Oh, really?
No, not
So
really.
So the little tiny microphones are called lavaliers, and what they do is they clip onto like the lapel of a subject, and oftentimes there'll be a little power pack that plugs into, and then that pack will either send the audio remotely, wirelessly to the board that's recording it, or it might even have a wire, like a microphone cable or something that goes out of it. And yeah, they're really great mics. They're subject to they pick up a lot of ambient sounds like people moving around and the rustling of their clothes and everything. But it's a great way to get the vocal of somebody as opposed to hanging a boom over them. Okay, let's go back to the class website here. Okay, so Bill, I don't know, did you realize that I had you down for a presentation today?
Didn't.
Okay, all right. So, and that's fine because we're just starting them up or whatever. So, do you think you might be able to put something together for maybe next week?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. All right. So let me ask you guys. I have a question to ask you guys. I just want to get your honest feedback on this. So, we've met the first couple weeks. We met virtually like this. Last week we actually came to Pima and met there. I gave you guys your keyboards, which you can use at home or at school. And I'm debating the question about whether this particular class should continue to be just all virtual, or if we should occasionally meet in person. So I just want to get your feedback on that. Is there a sentiment from you guys that you might like to keep it all virtual, or do some of you think you really like the idea of coming in occasionally?
I like coming in occasionally.
Human contact is nice.
Okay. So you guys are good with coming in. I see that. Let's see. Jillian likes coming to class. Max likes virtual. Gabby likes going to class. So I'm hearing a lot of feedback that's in the sort of going to class category. Does that sound about right for most of you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. How will that work with my presentation next week? Do I
Okay.
just do it in class or
Well,
figure out a way to do it twice?
no. So the best way to do your presentations, you guys, is do something like a Google slideshow and put it in your Google Drive, right? And then set the sharing settings on that to anyone who's at Pima, basically.
Okay.
And that way, even if somebody's not in class when you give your presentation, we can put a link on the website here, and they can go see it. Now, as far as the method in which you'll deliver your presentation, you can either, if it's on a day when we're meeting at school, you can stand up in front of the class and give it. That's kind of fun for some people. Some people it's terrifying, right? And if it's a day when we're meeting virtually, then you can just take over the screen here. You can just do a screen share and you can present it that way. Okay? Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's see. We've been talking for a little while now. I think I'm going to give you guys about like a 10-minute break. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about some other things. So it's 10:40 now, so let's come back about 10:50. Okay, thanks. Okay, I know you guys are just coming back from break, so it might take a few minutes for you all to filter back in here. Okay, allow them to unmute themselves. Okay, let's see. All right, perfect. Okay, so what I wanted to do was, I'll go back to sharing my screen a little bit here. And by the way, I muted everybody during the break because some people were moving around making some sounds. So if you want to talk, you might want to unmute yourselves. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I put some more links up on the website during the break. I wanted to talk about some other equipment that you guys can use that you'll use in your travels with film and audio, and what that equipment is used for specifically. So let me start here with the XLR cable. So does anybody know what an XLR cable is generally used for?
No, but I've heard the name tossed around quite a bit.
Okay, so if I click on this little link right here, and by the way, I'm just going to Amazon because it's an easy place to find pictures of things. I'm not endorsing any of these products or anything.
Are you working for Jeff?
Yeah, I'm working for Bezos. You can tell because I'm doing this high-paying job in addition to Bezos, right?
Used to plug in microphones onto the camera.
Right, very good. So this is the XLR cable, and they come in different lengths. You know, you can get them 5, 10, 20 feet or whatever. And they have what's called the male and the female end. The male end is the little points that are sticking out there. The female end is the 3 little holes there. And the microphone has a specific ending on it, and one end goes in there, and then the camera or the mixing board has the opposite plugs so that you can fit these in there. Now, these range in price, but they're pretty affordable because if you're doing audio recording, you need a lot of these because most microphones use this type of cable. Now, what's interesting about these is they're what's called noise canceling or balanced cables. Can anybody tell me a little bit about that? Let's see. You need to unmute yourself if you're talking Sunset here. Ask to unmute. Click on that.
Well, they're shielded and they've got twisted wires inside them that minimizes the amount of crosstalk between the 2 channels.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly the answer I was looking for. So basically, a balanced cable is shielded. A shielded cable has shielding around it, which prevents interference from other sound sources like radio waves and cell phones and things like that. And in addition to that, the balanced cables have 2 wires, and the 2 wires, as Bill said, what they do is, they both send audio, down the wire, right, from the microphone to your mixing board or to your camera. But what they do is each one of these wires acts to balance out the other. So in other words, let's say this wire is recording audio and it's also getting some noise, some junk, right? Well, the other wire also gets audio, but what it does is it sort of flips its polarity so that so what it does is it balances out and eliminates the noise from the other wire. So that's why it's called a balanced or a shielded cable. So of course, these XLR cables are fantastic to use for recording live sound or any sound because they're shielded. The other advantage to shielded cables is they can be very, very long. Sometimes you'll see a live concert that's happening on a stage, and the audio people, the sound booth or whatever, is 100, 200 feet away from the stage, and they're literally just running XLR cables all that way without interference, without audio interference, because they're so good. They're shielded cables. So this is definitely what you want to use. It's industry standard. Now, that is as opposed to a different type of cable, which is this one right here. Dylan, you've probably seen these, right?
Yes.
So, what are these used for generally?
Amps, guitars, microphones sometimes, but
Yeah.
mostly guitars and amps and basses.
Right, mostly electrical instruments, right? Keyboards, guitars, amps, things like that. So, you might call it an instrument cable. It's a very common name for it, but it actually has an official name. It's called a TRS cable. And a TRS cable, TRS stands for tip, ring, and sleeve. And the tip is the tip of the cable here. The ring is
Oh,
the ring around there, and then the sleeve is this part right here. And what it is there's like, 3 wires in there. One's like a grounding wire, and then there's 2 other wires in there. And each one, goes to one of these different connections here, the tip, the ring, or the sleeve. Now, does anybody have any idea whether these cables are balanced or not?
I believe they aren't.
You're correct. Instrument cables or TRS cables are unbalanced. What does that mean as far as like picking up noise?
It might pick up some extra noise, possibly.
It absolutely picks up extra noise. Now, what does that mean in regards to the length of it? Can you get this to be very long?
Yes.
You can get it to be very long, but the longer it is, the more interference you're going to pick up.
It's like the worse it is.
Yeah, the worse it is. That's why guitar cables, you'll generally won't find guitar cables any longer than 20 feet.
I've
Because
noticed that.
yeah, the longer they are, the more interference. I mean, they literally pick up radio waves and cell phone waves and all that kind of stuff. Like I play electric guitar. Sometimes you can play an electric guitar and you can hear the radio, coming through your amp. You know what I mean? Anyway, so these, of course, are something you would use if you're recording live sound, but you have to be aware of the fact that they're very noisy cables. They're not balanced like the other ones, right? Okay, so TRS, tip ring sleeve, and XLR. These are also called 1/4-inch cables, right? Because the tip of them is 1/4 inch wide, and that they should always be short. Okay. Now, another thing that's also part of your equipment that you're going to take out there are the windscreens that you're going to put over your boom mics. And of course, the windscreens, this one has my favorite name. It's called the Dead Cat windscreen. And, does anybody know what the purpose of this is? What it does?
To block out any other excessive noise.
Is it
Yeah,
for wind? Mostly,
exactly.
obviously.
So it's called a windscreen because one of the things it does is block out the sound of the wind, right? But it also blocks out other transient or ambient noises that are happening in the environment. And, it doesn't have to be a dead cat. It can be, there's ones that look a little different, a little more, a little less like cats. But they all serve the same purpose, which is to block the extra noise that you don't want. Okay, and then of course you guys are familiar with boom poles. Here's an example of a Rode boom pole, and those are a key element of recording on location. Now, let me ask you guys a question. If you go out and you shoot some footage and you record on location, is your audio work done?
No.
Okay, what happens? What is the potential for future audio work?
I kind of call it cleaning it up, as in regards to you might have some extra things you picked up, probably some things to cut out, make it a little more seamless.
Right, and there's something called automatic dialogue replacement. Have any of you guys ever heard that term?
Yeah, that for the text at the bottom so people can read and whatnot, or
Well, what it is like, okay, let's say you're shooting a movie like, The Matrix or something like that. So
right.
you go onto a green screen and you're shooting Keanu jumping around, dodging all the bullets and everything. You have boom microphones there and you're recording the sounds and you're recording what Keanu says. But is that the actual audio that ends up in the movie?
Oh, so I guess, okay, now I know what you're talking about. Okay, I see. So extra audio on top of what you already recorded as well to actually make it sound more realistic to the movie?
Yeah, so what'll happen is, like, let's say that you're recording a conversation that's happening in downtown Paris, right? So you take your actors and you put them on a street corner. You have your audio recording all the ambient sound and everything like that. You get their dialogue, you get the ambient sounds. But when you go into the recording studio to remix all of that, a huge percentage of the time you don't use that audio. What you do is, you project the video up on the screen and you have the actors come back in and they're sitting there looking at scripts with these really nice condenser microphones in front of them, and they basically do automatic dialogue replacement. They basically re-speak their lines while they're looking at the video to get this super clean, perfect audio, right?
Yeah, it should be called abysmal dialogue replacement.
That's good. I like that. Uh, Now, the reason they do that is because then they can absolutely control every aspect of the sound. You know, they send it over to their special. It seems counterintuitive, but they go to their special effects department, their Foley people, the people who do, you know, the special effects sounds, and they say, okay, we need the sounds of a Paris street corner in modern day life, right? So those people go over there and they record the sounds of people walking and cars honking and birds and all that, and they create this sound bed, this mix, and they give that, you know, to the sound engineer, and then the sound engineer takes the, you know, automatic dialogue, the dialogue that's been re-recorded, and mixes it with that sound, you know, pushes it out over the stereo spectrum, maybe in 5.1 surround sound, and then, you know, brings in any special effects like, you know, cars, screeching tires, gunfire, all that kind of stuff. And then they have complete control over the audio environment. You know, they can put sounds in one specific location. They can increase the sound of the dialogue or decrease it. And so that's what happens. So oftentimes you don't use the sound that you record on location. You know, you might use just a little bit of it to add a little depth to the overall mix. But some of the times you're just recording it, you know, to get a feel for what it sounds like. And then you give that to the people who recreate it in the studio. And sometimes if you're doing something like independent film, you know, you don't have the budget to do that, but also you want sort of the authenticity of the actual recording. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah. So have any of you shot footage, like maybe a short documentary or a short project for school, where all you use is the audio that you recorded on location?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how,
Yeah.
and what was the reason for that? Was it just like budget or authenticity or?
Yeah. So for the particular, there we go. Documentary, I was just sitting there interviewing a former Air Force Master Sergeant. So I just used a lavalier mic. So it was just the audio that he had. You know, it's basically just coming from him.
Okay. And so just using that provided a certain level of authenticity, which is what we expect from documentaries, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, so there's a time and a place to use that live location audio. You know, one reason to record it is, you know, what if something happens to the actor and you're not able to get them to do the automatic dialogue replacement? Then you have to use the live sound, right? Um, and you know, unfortunately, it's an unfortunate reality that some actors, you know, die during productions of films, and then you know, all they have is what was shot on location, so they have to use that. So it serves as a backup, and it can serve to reinforce whatever you redo in the studio. Um, okay, so I want to play. There's a couple other links here. There's a link here for. There's more detail about microphone polar patterns. If you're really interested in this, you can check out this article that goes into extreme depth about all the different polar patterns there are. There's even more than I mentioned. You know, we talked about the cardioid, which is a heart shape, but there's something called supercardioid and hypercardioid. Those of you who are really interested in you know, the music terminology and that type of recording can check that out. But I did want to play a couple of sound clips for you guys to talk about a couple of other aspects of audio. One of them is this thing called the proximity effect. Let me click on this little link right here. Okay, proximity effect right here. Okay, here we go. So does anybody know what the proximity effect is? Okay, what does the word proximity mean?
Refers
Like
to small or large amount of distance, usually some type of field.
If somebody, if proximity means closeness, okay? So, you know, the proximity effect actually translates to meaning the closeness effect. And what that is, it's literally what happens when you get too close to a microphone. And what happens?
You get muffled audio and, high spikes in it as well.
You do get that. What else do you get? What happens to the actual quality of the sound? Or I should say the frequency.
Reverb.
It's what?
You get some reverb.
It's not about reverb so much as it is about the, I should say the frequency of the sound and the volume. Can you think about what happens when you get really close to a mic and you start talking?
And you get noises.
A lot of air.
Some of the harder vowels.
Right. So what happens is, all these things you guys are saying come into effect. So basically you can get, harder sounds like, especially if you don't have a pop screen. But one of the main things that happens is, your voice gets a lot louder, but it also gets a lot lower. The frequency of it sounds a lot lower, right? Let me play a little example for you. Okay.
I'm talking to you now at 4 feet in front of the RCA 44 ribbon mic. As I begin to walk closer and walk in towards the mic, and as I get on the mic, you're going to notice a sharp rise in the bass response, a low end boost. It's called proximity effect, which gives a deepness, a darkness, a fullness to the sound. Actually, I call it a sexiness to the sound, which normally my voice just does not have.
Okay, does that make sense? That when you get closer, it's going to get very deep and full sounding, right? That's called the proximity effect. Now, in what industry do they take advantage of that effect?
Podcasts, radio stations.
Yeah, podcasts and radio broadcasting, right? You ever hear all of those broadcasters sound like, they have that super deep, very present voice? That's because they're literally right up there on the microphone. And they're taking advantage of that proximity effect. Now, can somebody give me an example of how you might consciously use the proximity effect when you're doing like a film a production or an audio production to help sort of counterbalance something that's missing or to provide a special effect that you want?
The only special effect thing I could think of is if you were doing possibly like a horror movie and you wanted some kind of like jump scare add-on effect vocally.
Right, like like if you're doing a horror movie and you wanted to have a narrator who was going to talk into the microphone and try and scare people with like this very full dark voice. That's
Yeah.
Now, can somebody give me an example of like, okay, let's say you're recording a musician, a vocalist. Let's say you have a band that has a male and a female vocalist. How could you use the proximity effect to your advantage? What does the proximity effect do?
I think you could possibly have them stand at different distances. So, maybe it'd be better for harmonizing the voice, or make it so one of the vocalists is not overpowering, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so in the audio clip that we just heard, the gentleman was talking about how when he got close to the microphone, the voice deepened, it became more present, but it also sounded sexier, right? So depending on the type of song you're recording, let's say you're recording a sort of a more than words kind of, acoustic ballad or something like that, and you want the sound to be very sexy and sensual, you can get a male singer right up there on the microphone and they'll be very present, right? The other thing I was kind of looking for was if you have a female vocalist, and female vocalists tend to sing in a higher range, if you put them closer to the microphone, what it's going to do is it's going to add mid-range and bass to their voice and balance it out, right? And that's even true for you guys if you're recording somebody for an interview, right? Like let's say that you're recording, the female head of production of, West End film or something like that. And so she comes in and she sits down in the chair, and you have like, a boom mic or something like that, or maybe you just have let's just say you have a microphone on one of those little movable stands and you put it in front of her. So what happens is you put like a a pop screen, a filter on top of it to catch the sibilance, right? But you put that microphone right up against, her face and say, stay right on that microphone, stay right on top of that microphone when you talk. And what it does is if she has a higher voice, then it adds mid-range and low range. If you want that, you can always just record her voice the way it sounds, but it can flesh out the sound and make it more rich. The same is true of men with higher voices. You can do that to make it occupy more of the frequencies of the audio spectrum. Okay, another sound clip I wanted to play for you guys is these reverb examples here. Okay, we know reverb is, the sound of sort of an echoey sound, right? And that there's different types of reverb. Every environment you're in, every one of you has a certain amount of reverb that comes across your microphone based on your room, the amount of reflections, how big the room is, how sensitive your microphone is. Now, the larger the space, traditionally, the more reverberations there are, because it takes longer for the sound to get out there. It takes longer for it to come back. And so there's, these echoes that go on and on. Like, for example, the Grand Canyon, if you go yell in the Grand Canyon, you hear these reverberations, bouncing off the walls. So here, what you can see is, here is somebody trying different types of reverb. And let's go ahead and listen to this and we can talk about the different types.
This is a test using the Universal Audio UAD1 Dreamverb unit. First reverb, Hall Cathedral. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Second reverb, Room, large dark room. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Third reverb, Room, small chamber. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Fourth reverb, Plate 140, dark plate. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Fifth reverb, Plate, large and bright. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Sixth reverb, Drum, live room. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Seventh reverb, Guitar, solo presence. This is a test. This is only a reverb test. Eighth reverb, Special effects, party sound system. This is a test. This is only a reverb test.
Okay, so you can hear from all those different types of reverb, he's using what's called a reverb unit. And it's just a little electronic device. You can switch the buttons and you get different type of reverbs. Now, when you guys are recording, once you have your audio recorded, if it's in some type of DAW, digital audio workstation, such as GarageBand or Audacity, which is a free program a lot of people use, you can just apply different types of reverb to that soundtrack and get different types of sounds, right? So, for example, if you're doing this automatic dialogue replacement, like I said, if you film somebody in a church, in a cathedral, you got your live, your location sound that you got with the boom pole, but then you bring them back into the studio and now you're doing automatic dialogue replacement. You have them record, the dialogue super clean with the nice condenser mics. And then what you do is when you're mixing it, you add a little bit of cathedral reverb and it gives you those reverberations. So it places them in that environment, right? Whereas the opposite would be if they're in a small room, then you could use one of the live room verbs. And I can demo some in a future class. I'll demo some live reverbs for you guys. Okay, so one of the things I wanted, this is sort of a switch over to from talking about the equipment of music and audio to talking about sort of the historical aspect of sound recordings and what can happen to them based on, you know, how you store them and stuff. So I wanted to click here on this article, and I want to ask you guys if any of you have heard about this. It's called The Day That Music Burned. Is anybody aware of this?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's a really interesting article. It's worth reading. It's a little bit on the sad side, but basically, you know, we talked about the different types of audio that, you know, audio recording equipment that have evolved throughout the years. And, you know, first there was the mechanical, you know, the cylinders that got inscribed on. And then we went to things like tape, you know, magnetic tape. We went to eventually digital, and, you know, on and on and on, all these different types of evolutions of recording. Well, back in the, you know, in the early part of the mid part of the century, back in the 50s and 60s, it was when they were in the tape era. They were recording things on tape. And some of what we know as the most classic recordings, really of all genres, jazz, show tunes, blues, rock and roll, you know, you name it. Some of the most famous recordings by some of the most famous artists ever, whether it's Frank Sinatra, Chuck Berry, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, right, the Eagles, you know, in the 70s. A lot of those got recorded to tape. And that tape, the original master tapes, you know, had to be stored in certain conditions, certain, you know, temperatures, you know, to preserve them. Well, you may or may not be aware, but the music industry over the years has collapsed down and merged down into where basically it's like 3 or 4 major companies: Universal Music Group, Warner Media, you know, Sony. There's only 3 or 4 major conglomerates that own most of the music out there, right? Well, Universal, which had a huge music collection, you know, they owned master copies for, you know, Nirvana and Chuck Berry and all these people, Fleetwood Mac. They decided to store all of their music in a warehouse that was on one of their film lots. Okay, so they had a film lot where they had all of these, you know, sets and everything with the film productions, and then they had a warehouse, and they just stored all of these master tapes in there. Well, one day they had a fire on the set, and the fire went out of control, burned up, you know, the whole lot, and then it went over and it burned up the warehouse that was keeping all of the master tapes for all these artists, and they were just gone, right? And Universal didn't let anybody know. They didn't let the artists know that this had happened. You know, for years they just kind of stonewalled about it, right? But it's kind of interesting because it's a piece of musical history that is lost, and it's lost because of the way these people decided to store this, you know, these archival recordings, and the way they took care or didn't take care of them. But, you know, it's worth checking out this article if you're interested. It talks about, you know, the fire itself and the damage it did. But one of the most sort of devastating things about it is when you look at the list of destroyed music, and it's everything from like almost anybody you can think of. A lot of these people were, you know, mid-century, last century, but a lot of them weren't. You know, there's people like Benny Goodman, Ray Charles, right? Then there's a country and western like George Jones and Merle Haggard. Then you get the singer-songwriters like Joan Baez, Sonny and Cher. We go up to Elton John, the Eagles.
We got Yoko Ono.
What's that? Yoko Ono? Yeah, right. Okay. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Police,
Oh man.
Sheryl Crow, Beck, Tupac Shakur, 50 Cent, right? So, like, an unbelievable richness of music was lost in these fires, right? And it's just like I said, it's tragic, but it's worth reading the article because it's so interesting to see, you know, what happened, why it happened, and what the result is for all these musicians whose music is just gone forever. Now, you might say, you know, well, there's recordings out there already, you know, so they didn't really lose their music forever. But you might be aware of the fact that one of the things that happens with music regularly is remixing of sound recordings. Like, for example, the last couple years they've been celebrating the 50th anniversary of a lot of the Beatles stuff. Like, 50 years ago today, Sergeant Pepper came out, right? So what they'll do is they'll go back to the original recordings and they'll remix Sergeant Pepper's using the latest digital technology, and they'll come out with this incredible sounding, music that they'll put on vinyl and put out. And of course, they'll make a bunch more money, but then it's just an incredible experience for people. But without those master recordings, you're doomed. You can't do it. You can't use like a record to make a master recording. You have to use the master recordings, right? So, and then I think at the end here, if I'm not mistaken, there's yet another depressing list of. Sorry to bum you out if you're into all this, but there's another, and it's a huge article. Look at the length of this article, right? But I think there's a huge list at the end of this, or maybe there's a link in here. Yeah, I think it's a link somewhere. Somewhere in here, there is a link that takes you to an unbelievable list of all the people who lost stuff, and it's really heartbreaking. But there you go. We lost some Kurt Cobain stuff and Nirvana, Elton John, all that good stuff. So if you get a chance and you have an hour to kill or whatever,
File lost them.
What's that?
Did the artists, did they sue?
Yeah, so what happened was, that's a great question, Max. What happened was Universal didn't tell anybody. They lost almost their entire music collection, and they didn't tell anybody because they were too worried about the lawsuits. So for years, what would happen is Elton John would call them up and say, hey, we're going to do a 50th anniversary remix of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, right? Can we get the master tapes sent over from you guys? And they'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, we're having trouble locating those because we have facilities all over the world, and we couldn't you just use the copies of the master tapes that you guys already have? So for years they lied about it and they didn't let anybody know. And then when the musicians found out, they were devastated. And yeah, there's a class action lawsuit happening, right? But it's a really interesting sort of historical event, that's worth checking into. Okay, all right. So what I think I'm going to do right now, I said I'd give you guys some time to work on your projects. I'm going to give you guys basically the rest of the period to work on project 1. It's due in 2 weeks. It seems like a lot of time, but it's not really. If you think about all the stuff you have to do and all the other distractions you have. So why don't you spend some time right now working on that? I'll stay online here. If you guys have any questions, you can just pipe in and let me know. And then I'll check in with you at the end of class to see how everybody's doing. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and work on your projects.